Hello and welcome to the Integrated Rehab and Performance Podcast. My name is Dr. Nick Curtis and I'm running the show here at the Integrated Rehab and Performance Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Today we have our first interview version of the podcast. We are talking with Virgil Herring. He is a teacher, golf professional here in Brentwood, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. He's been doing it for a while down here, and he's doing some fascinating things that everybody needs to go check out no matter where you're at. We talk about that here in the episode today and how you can go and learn more about the different things that he's doing. We talk a little bit about his coaching philosophy, his teaching philosophy, and as well as the connection that he has with the mental game and what certain concepts he uses in coaching that with his clients. Also, some other ways that he is using that knowledge and experience in the corporate world and some other opportunities that he has gotten into recently, which is, again, pretty interesting stuff. I myself discuss a little bit of the philosophy and ways of I go about working on clients in the opposite side of the spectrum, but you'll be surprised to see that there's a lot of similarities nevertheless, right? We are doing a lot of the same things, just with slightly different goals, and we talk a little bit about how we are such a good combination when it comes to clients here in the Nashville area, getting the results that they are looking for. So that being said, let's get into the podcast. Again, this is Virgil Herring, Nashville, Tennessee. All right, Virgil, thank you for being with me here today. This is the first interview golf podcast, so it's an honor to have you on. You have a lot going on. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit to the people and let them know what you're up to?
First, thanks for having me on your podcast, Nick. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to communicate with you. For those of you that don't know, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been teaching here for 27 years. I'm two-time Tennessee Teacher of the Year, former Golf Channel Academy coach, and now I've partnered up with the famous sports executive agent, Dave Meltzer, who's basically Jerry Maguire. And I'm doing corporate golf coaching where I use golf as the platform to teach people life lessons. I think we stopped playing games very early in our life. And if you remember correctly, you learned almost all of the best lessons through competing, whether it be Little League baseball, football, what have you. Mm-hmm. When we stop playing games, we end up learning life's lessons the hard way. So I'm trying to remind people that they can use games to sharpen their mental edge while getting better at the sport that they love it simultaneously. So that's been a huge success for me recently. And my TED Talk, which I became the first PGA professional to ever do a TED Talk last August, has really skyrocketed my career in a different way, being able to public speak, which I did obviously last night. Mm-hmm. So it's I'm on a fun ride because I don't put any limits on myself. I try to encourage others to feel the same way. I don't want to be just known as a golf teacher. Mm-hmm. I want to be known as somebody who impacts people's lives in a positive way. And I get a chance to do that by a podcast, both being a guest and having my own. Yep. Through books, public speaking, TV, radio. I get a chance to do a lot of cool things. And most of the time, it's just because I said yes and figured out how to do it. Of course. I don't turn down opportunities.
Yeah, very good. That's a very interesting dynamic there where you're using golf and then you're starting to branch out into those concepts, those ideas where we can turn golf into being so much more. And I think golf's probably, and surely you've realized this, one of the best ways of going about doing that in terms of the mental game that's involved in golf. So I do want to touch on that a little bit, but before we do that, could you tell us a little bit more about when you kind of started in golf, where you came from, and then how you've grown with golf and gotten here to that Nashville area?
Sure. So I grew up in a town just barely south of the Civil War town in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg. Yeah. The only thing that I really cared about most of my life was pitching. I tore my rotator cuff at 15 and I tore it again at 17. The second one was a baseball ender for me. So I chose golf. I loved golf because in team sports, I really struggled with the fact that if I played good and we lost, I was supposed to be disappointed. And I also struggled if we won and I played poorly, that I wasn't supposed to be hard on myself for underperforming. where golf just kind of it gives you what you got.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't do well, you paid the price. But if you did do well, you know that all the things that you've been preparing yourself to do came to fruition, and that's satisfactory, and nobody else is there to judge that. And then I went to Mississippi State University, where they have the professional golf management program.
Yeah.
So I knew that my brain was not going to function well sitting in a cubicle.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm an athlete, and that's all I've really ever done. So I was very fortunate that there was a major that allowed me to major in the golf industry.
Mm-hmm.
And when I graduated from Mississippi State in 1997, I was very, very fortunate. In the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell talks about there are certain events that occur that you have no control over that throttle you forward. So exactly 1 month before I graduated, Tiger Woods wins the 97 Masters by 12.
Yeah.
And throws golf and junior golf into a massive frenzy.
Mm-hmm.
And I come to a place that is a junior golf mecca with really only one teacher and hundreds of kids. And I ended up having a full book by the 6th day after graduation.
Right.
And I've been teaching full time essentially since May 23rd,
Wow.
1997.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Interesting how things like that work out. Right. And
yeah,
sure,
for sure.
Sure enough that you express that, and that comes out in the work that you do in the TED Talk, in the book, and then the way you talk with the corporate golfers and the lessons you try to teach with that. So interesting stuff there, and you've been busy ever since. What would you say that you have a coaching philosophy? You're someone who has you use a lot of things in the way that you go about kind of the way yourself, right? So when the way that you are translating things to, the golf game, to other things like business and life, and the way that we can use one to teach you in other regards, right? So when it comes to golf, specifically coaching, surely there's some philosophy behind the way that you actually go about looking at the swing and then addressing it. What can you tell us about kind of that process that you have in that?
Well, I believe that I bend speed is what I do. So when I'm getting a golf lesson started, I'm going to ask my client to swing as fast as they can.
Yeah.
Just give me a 7-iron, give me full rip. Let me see what you got.
Interesting.
I want to see what their body does instinctively to create speed.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And as soon as I see what they do to create speed, I'm using TrackMan to gauge like, oh, so this guy is 7 degrees over the top, or for right-handed golfer, his path is going 7 degrees to the left. I have to bend that swing 7 degrees more to the right.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep as many thoughts off of his mind as I can, because you can't compete at golf and be thinking about a whole host of things.
Right.
So I'm not a guy who does what I call open heart surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what do you do? Okay, so your best effort while trying to do it right goes 7 left. So we got to do something that feels 7 right.
Yeah.
Now, here's the crazy thing about that. For him to go from 7 to 0, he has to feel like he swings 7 right, which is 14 degrees of change in the feel to get 7 degrees of real. So people want to know why it sucks to get golf lessons and why there's pain in the learning process, is because the feel that you have to go through to get better is literally twice as bad as the reality.
Yeah.
And I just got done teaching a very talented golfer just like 10 minutes ago, and he literally couldn't believe that every backswing kept hitting the foam because he takes it too far inside. And he's like, I swear I'm taking it outside. I'm like, it's more outside, but it's not outside enough. Yeah. So I use barricades or implements in the way of your natural tendency that I know the brain hates to fail more than it wants to do it right. So if I stick things in the way of what you tend to do and you hit it, there's a negative enforcement on the brain. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
So they change through the fear of failure. And while they don't hit, usually it's a piece of foam in some way, a pool noodle, they get the dopamine hit of, I didn't do it wrong. Boy, that felt weird.
Yeah.
And then they keep building on it. And then whatever ends up being that feel, no matter how horrendous the feel, their brain can easily buy in, because I also back it up with video, like, oh, wow, I'm not nearly as outside, inside, vertical, flat, whatever, as I think I am. And now whatever that feels like becomes a positive feel, not this horrendous, weird feel. And I know how the brain works, which is really what I think is my advantage when it comes to coaching.
Right.
Is the golf swing has been pretty much the same for 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we really don't know until recently how the brain works under duress and what the elite players do versus the good players, what good does versus average, and average does versus poor. And my job is to be able to teach you how to hack into the right part of your mind right before you're getting ready to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to do that is a skill that is just as learned as, putting the golf club on plane.
Yeah.
It all is coachable. I have technology that validates that you're there. It's called Focus Band. And when I train people to get into the zone and they learn how to access the correct part of their brain so that all of their muscle memory, which is stored in the cerebellum, when the cerebellum fires the instructions to the muscles,
yeah,
it allows you to perform at the highest level that you can. But if you're worried about OB left, water right, did I cock it up right? Is the club face closed? Is it open? Did I transfer my weight? All of those things sound like I need to be more perfect. So when more perfect sounds like I'm not good enough, what does that do? That engages the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, when it gets involved in high-speed motor function, it makes it really clunky.
Oh, yeah.
So if people are out there and they feel like when they're trying to make good golf swings in tournament play and they feel like they lose it, that's because they're in the wrong part of their mind while trying to perform.
Mm-hmm.
That's my passion for coaching.
Oh, I see.
That's my specialty. Even though most people think I'm a swing technician,
Sure.
I'm really underneath the hood tuning up the brain to allow what you already know how to do to occur when you need it the most.
Yeah, well said. A lot of interesting points there. If that prefrontal cortex is highly involved in that swing, good point. You're not where you want to be, right? That'll never be a
Nope.
good thing. You had mentioned a couple things. I love that idea of using speed right off the bat to get a sense of where you can almost go a layer deeper to see, okay, how do they actually want to create speed and movement and power, right? Because you're going to get them up there and they're going to try to swing how they think you want them to swing, right? Or they've seen some videos and they're like, well, I know I'm kind of like need to do this. So it's going to be their swing that they think is close to what a swing should be. But that's not how their body actually wants to create power, right? Or swing, right? You take a baseball player
Yep.
and you make, he's playing golf now and you say, hey, actually swing hard. That those baseball tendencies might come out a little bit, right? So you can break through all that and get a good idea of, how does this body want to move? We use similar tests like a SFMA, selective functional movement assessment, where we do global screening of movement, basic movements, but we have multiple joints and complexes of joints moving. And part of that screen is to see, where some mobility losses, but where maybe some stability missing. But we also want to see how does your brain decide to accomplish that task, that movement, right? And you can get a lot from that. So that's kind of similar to how you're going about looking at that swing specifically and creating power, which at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to.
I mean, the number one fundamental in anything is speed.
Yeah.
The company that solves the problem the fastest is the one that has the highest wealth.
Yeah.
The guy who can run the fastest wins the gold medal in the 100. He's the hardest person to tackle in the football field. He's the guy who breaks away for dunks in basketball. And the guy who swings the fastest has almost always been, given that they're on tour.
Yeah.
If you think back to when they could really look at it, Bobby Jones swung faster than everybody. Ben Hogan swung faster than everybody. Jack Nicklaus swung faster than everybody. Tiger Woods swung faster than everybody. And then if you look at the current run of what we call the elite, Rory and DJ swung faster than everybody. And now we have this a little anomaly, which is Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler still swings fast, but he's not the fastest.
Yeah.
But he has an outlier gift, which is radical precision.
You're right.
He hits it so close to the hole compared to everybody else that is his ace of spades that he throws in there when Rory has a chance to win. His level of precision is so high. So, I think that you could argue that DeChambeau is the real fastest guy now.
Right.
He had an outstanding year in the majors. Scotty Scheffler's by no means slow. He's fast, but not that fast.
Yeah.
But he conquers with a different outlier talent. And then Xander Schauffele is in the top 5 in speed.
Mm-hmm.
Speed is the fundamental.
Yep.
My job is to get you to have to compete with as few thoughts as possible while being as naturally fast as you can be. And if you ask me why I've had so much success with my players, is that my players are thinking less than most people.
Yeah. Fantastic. That I think has a lot to do with, we had mentioned that prefrontal cortex, and then what is behind all the layers of how they actually want to swing. When those two things are coming up, where you're thinking so much and you haven't addressed your kind of root swing of how you like to create power and change that a little bit, when those two things start coming out a little bit, maybe after a couple of holes and maybe one bad hole, right, all of a sudden you're looking at that water a little bit differently than you were before, and you want to make it over, whatever it might be. Yeah, you can just see how things go from there. You had
You have to understand the brain's number one job is to keep you safe,
right,
physically, mentally, and emotionally. So when people, because I teach a lot of competitive golfers, they know that hitting it in the water, hitting it out of bounds, hitting the bunker is a penalty.
yeah,
That means that the brain is trying to protect them from it. So unfortunately, when that happens, that gets the prefrontal cortex fired up because it's trying to parse through, making sure we don't make any mistakes.
mm-hmm.
And there are hacks into that.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, that's the real challenge for everybody. Is the brain is trying to keep you safe. Don't go in the water. Don't hit it out of bounds. Stay out of that bunker. Don't go into the trees to the right. And then the more you worry about where you don't want it to go, the more it goes there.
Of course.
And you got to learn how to train people in that manner. And I would imagine you're in a similar boat, not quite exactly the same, which is the fear of what they're doing.
Oh yeah,
impacts how they train.
absolutely. The something called kinesiophobia, where people get nervous or scared of certain movements. So a big example of this would be people with knee pain, and then things like walking up the stairs. They change their entire gait, the way they go about doing it, which just creates other problems, because now we're biomechanically just doing things in different ways, not necessarily the way they were designed. Now the body's robust, of course, but over time, in certain situations, we do get issues from that. Same thing with like a back squat, other types of big movements like that. We have an experience where we have some pain, we're lifting the low back. Maybe we've had like a disc issue or something like that from a back squat, and the way they're squatting now is completely different, and it is certainly not better, right? And so now the knee pain comes from that, the hip pain comes from that. They're shifting into one side because they want to stay off that one side. And it's that same idea you talked about earlier. I do a lot of recording when I work with golfers and on the rehab side and getting into that performance side. Record everything because they have to be able to see, because it's such a disconnect. And so you can see maybe in a squat pattern or something, this shift into one side, and a rotation often comes with that. And if I'm trying to teach a golfer to use their left hip, or to know what it feels like to be strong and get into that left hip, and we can't even get them to do something simple like a squat with getting equally on both sides, because they're shifting out of that right side. They need to be able to see that. You had mentioned in the swing where you're trying to maybe get things on plane or whatever, and to see that difference, and then show them what it feels like to actually get that back to closer to where it needs to be, and see that's what that actually feels like. They'll never believe you unless they can see, hey, this last rep you did, this last swing, that was good. Like, there's no way. I felt like I was on the completely, wrong side. And then you show them and they see, yeah, that was exactly where it needed to be. That's what that feels like. Same thing with a squat. Same thing with these medicine ball drills we do to try to get that feel back. You had mentioned a lot about how important feel is when I'm working with patients, especially golfers, and we're getting closer towards that performance side. Same thing I like to work on is that feel. Is we have to translate all this mobility work, all this stability and strength work, all the generic power work that we're doing eventually has to translate into a golf swing, right? And we need to do that without creating worse issues, compensations, right? So feel is really important, that I'm translating that eventually towards the end to getting them to feel the right things, to post up on that lead hip and create power through that, to actually rotate through the pelvis when they're doing that, and not do it from some other means, right? Not focusing on trunk flexion or something to do something like that. No. keeping feet in the right spot, preventing cueing like an early extension or an over the top type power production, movement pattern. So we can put some constraints in the way is a great way to put it, using the environment to create
Mm-hmm.
constraints and then say, now create power, right? So long as we're not creating any sort of issues and we're translating that into the swing a little bit, now they are primed and ready to go and see someone like yourself. And they at least know what it feels like to use that hip. Someone comes in with no hip mobility at all. They're completely avoiding it by either extending forward into the shot. They're avoiding rotating the hip by sliding, or just translating the whole pelvis side to side. We can get them to get the mobility back, get strength back into that hip, get them to see what it actually feels like to use that hip, right? As opposed to changing the table test. Hey, I can see your mobility is doing so much better. No, eventually we got to get them standing up and using that hip in a powerful way, then a little bit more golf specific. And now when you go and ask them to do it after a couple reps to feel it out, now they're open game. I like to put it, as I've told you before, I like to give people like yourself a blank canvas of a golfer. So whatever you ask from them, they at least have no physical limitations in it. And then you can really do what you love to do, which is work on that brain, right? The golf game, the brain, the technical, getting everything back to where it needs to be, wherever works for them, whatever it might be, right? So very interesting that you mentioned all these things. It's the same thing, just hyper focused on the physical part, right? Feel, same thing, working on focusing, feeling the right things, the generic mobility, translating that all the way up the chain into performance, and working on pain in a lot of cases too.
And this lends itself right into exactly what I was talking about at the very beginning. What it takes to be great. There aren't many ways to be great, and they translate in every endeavor.
Sure.
So what I do, we just sounded like it was a bunch of golf stuff.
Yeah.
What you do is a bunch of training, but the process in which we go about doing it is exactly the same, minus the specific words for your endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that's so important for people to understand is that, like Nick Saban says it beautifully. He's like, if you want to be great, there's not one way to be great, but there aren't many ways to be great.
Yeah.
But you have to follow a system or a process that allows you a repetitive cycle that you go through to ensure that you're checking all the boxes so that you know that you did the best that you could that day.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the greatest gifts that you can have, and this is something I hang my hat on, is that you want to compete and you want to feel like you shake the hand of the person that beats you, not have to look in the mirror to see the guy who beat you.
Yeah, well said.
And that's all I ever want my players to do. And that's really hard because junior golfers, well, any golfer really, is impressionalized by winning more than they are impressionalized by their personal best. Mm-hmm. So I just had a client last night. I'm like, listen, if you shot 66 tomorrow and didn't win, how does that sound to you? It sucks. I'm like, buddy, you got a problem. Right. Because if you shoot 5 shots lower than your lowest score ever in tournament play and you don't win, you didn't lose.
Yeah.
Somebody outperformed you, but you're not a loser.
Right.
Well, yeah, I am because I didn't win. I'm like, well, that mindset is your limiting factor.
Of course. Yep. Well said.
And that, I mean, to me, Atomic Habits, James Clear, 1% better every day, has a radical game, but 1% worse every day.
Same
woo!
Thing.
Yeah. It doesn't take long until you're not a factor at all.
Yep.
So I'm just into people's personal best. I spend a lot of time talking about it, and it translates exactly what it is that you're doing at what you do. You're not trying to make somebody Flex Lewis. You're trying to make that guy 1% better than he was when he came in, and then keep building the blocks. And in 100 days, that is a massive amount of change in somebody's mobility, strength, or both.
That's right. Yeah. Their potential.
And it's unfortunate that many people can't fathom that that's how we think. Mm-hmm. They think that it's only the result. And obviously social media has turned us into a result-driven society. Right. But at the end of the day, our job is to not only teach them the physical, but also teach them the mindset of what it takes to be great. And then that allows us other opportunities. Is this happening in other parts of your life?
Yeah.
Because ultimately these habits affect everything that people do. And that to me is the funnest part of my life right now.
No doubt.
Is it's more than golf.
Yeah.
Golf's my vehicle. That's what I'm known for, but it allows me to make a bigger impact. And you're doing the exact same thing where you're at. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm glad that there's someone shining some light on that and doing the work to translate those thoughts and ideas and thinking about how those manifest in other parts of life to be shared with, to let people start thinking about that and chewing on that and understand that better. Briefly, you had mentioned youth golfers. I do want to ask you a few questions on just generally with these golfers that you're working with, youth, young golfers. What are you seeing in terms of common things that you need to work on with the young golfers? And I'd like to know, similar when you see adults, club golfers, what are you seeing with those guys who are just trying to maintain their game, get a little bit better, maybe win a member here and there?
Well, the first moving fundamental is the pivot. And there are three kind of pivots, but they don't really change that much. There's a front loading pivot, a centered pivot, and a trail leg loading pivot, but there's not that much variance to it, but there is a body type that goes along with it.
Yep.
But if you can't pivot, if you can't coil into your trail leg in the backswing, you can't play. Exclamation point, period, end of sentence. So every person that comes into me is struggling at something.
Yeah.
And almost always their pivot is not pure. They either sway a little bit to the right, their hips are so tight that they restrict their upper body's ability to get behind the ball. Something is going on within the hip pivot that is ruining the situation. Because in my opinion, there are four fundamentals, and the first one is the pivot. If you don't get the pivot right, you can't get 2, 3, or 4, period.
I see.
So that's the most important one. Kids also, generally speaking, don't have the hand strength to stabilize the forces of the golf swing with the driver and 3-wood, because essentially at 115 miles per hour, the driver with the forces is like swinging almost a 30-pound kettlebell.
Right, yeah.
That's how much outward force there is. Well, if they don't have the ability to do a kettlebell swing with a 30-pound kettlebell, there is no way that they can stabilize the face.
Yeah.
So 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that aren't strong enough, they still hit the ball fine, but there's going to be some curve on the ball because they can't stabilize the face because their left wrist, forearm isn't strong enough to stabilize it if they're a right-handed golfer, to stabilize the face, and their hand kind of just gives out through the ball, so there's closure.
Yeah, yeah.
At the end of the day, that's why I'm always trying to pump people towards people like you, because they don't realize that there's no sport in the world that the human body creates more horsepower than the golf swing. Right. So if anybody says that golf's not a sport, they literally have no idea what they're talking about, because it is maybe the most violent sport on the body that's not contacted by another human being.
Of course.
It is an extremely violent motion played from a bent over side on situation, which is abnormal.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, the two biggest issues I see, poor pivot and inability to stabilize the violence that the golf swing creates. That could be in their footwork, that could be in their hips, it could be in their shoulders, it could be in their hands. But at the end of the day, if somebody goes into the second fundamental, which is the golf club has to fall backward before it comes downward. If they're struggling there's a mobility issue there.
Yeah.
That's not normal. They're either protecting a pain or something's too tight and they're recruiting the wrong muscles to make something happen. At the end of the day, then I'm like, okay, you got to go see Nick, because this right here is clearly a physical limitation that is more than likely rectifiable.
Yep.
And kids, because they haven't learned how to train correctly, plus they're growing so fast, they need to be trained how to train early in their lifetimes. Because as you well know, there are so many people that get injured because they don't know actually how to do a proper squat, how to do a proper, anything for that matter. And when you're throwing weight around, you better know what the heck you're doing or you're in big trouble. And it's so obvious in our life. we're surrounded in everything we watch with complete uninformed stupidity.
Yes.
And then like they wonder why something bad happened. Like, well, did you investigate how to do this? No, I'm afraid to ask.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't want to look dumb.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to seem like I'm uneducated. Well, guess how you get educated? You ask good questions so that you can become better at it. But people are so afraid. Once again, I really think it's social media that has made this even worse. They're so afraid of not sounding like an expert when they're 14 years old,
Right.
that the humiliation that they gain from their other peers making fun because they don't know, when most of the time the people that are making fun of them don't know either.
Yep.
There's so few. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's education. And my job is to help people understand there aren't many things that have to happen to play enjoyable golf.
Yeah.
To play enjoyable golf is not much. To play on TV, that's a different ballgame.
Sure.
But to play enjoyable golf, there's not that much that has to happen. But if your body won't let you do it, they need you. If their body can do it, they need me.
Yep.
And then together, the sky's the limit. And that's what it's all about.
That's right.
To me.
Yeah. Well said. That's almost like that growth oriented type mindset where just imagine how sharp someone could be if they've maintained that their whole life of the confidence to admit that you don't know, or just to ask questions at will, right? Imagine if you had lived your whole life that way and gotten the resources you needed and had been willing to do that. That's how champions could be created. Like a lot of people think about starting their children off young, or maybe even young people, kids, thinking that they're going to dedicate so much time and energy into the physical or the coaching, all important stuff. But if they had dedicated maybe a mindset to, I'm going to be relentless in my pursuit to understand, fearlessly ask questions, and just be a learner throughout their entire adolescence, right? Teens into adulthood and everything like that. It's a game changer. It'll change your entire life, not just your golf game, that's for sure. So that's a great little message that hopefully some youth golfers can start to appreciate. When it comes to the adults, right? Some club members, things like that you're seeing. There's some fundamentals you had mentioned with the youth. Are you seeing those same issues coming with, again, there's a spectrum. There's some golfers that you're seeing that have been playing for a long time. They understand a lot of things. Others that maybe have been playing a long time, but they need a lot of work, right? Is there one or two things that you think are the most recurring when it comes to your older clients, things that you're working on with almost everyone?
Yeah, well, it starts with the pivot. Yeah. Most of the time, they've spent most of their life sitting in a chair at the office in front of a computer. So their hips, their IT band, psoas, internal, external hip rotator are so tight. They're not weak. They're so tight that when they think they've turned enough, they got like 65 degrees of shoulder coil and 25 degrees of hip rotation. And I end up saying to more people than not, like, I want you to make a backswing that you turn until you literally couldn't turn another degree, then come down.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, that's too far back. And then they look on the video and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not even close. I'm like, that's right. Feel versus real.
That's right. It comes again.
And then, then I would almost say, like, adults who've been playing golf for a long time, if they learned how to play the game in the 80s and then never took lessons, they just danced with the girl that they brought and they were good.
Right.
And as soon as they kind of lose it, whether it's because they're in their mid 50s and they start to lose their feet stabilization and their footwork can't stabilize them like they used to, or they, in overtime, shoulder injury, whatever, they start to run into some pain and they have to come in and get a golf lesson. And they learn that they don't have to take it inside and drop it to the inside, swing out to the right. That's old, terrible information. And then they have to, it's not hard to learn golf. It's hard to unlearn it.
Sure.
And they have 40 years of incorrect thoughts that it's really hard on them. It's really hard on people to find out that, for the last 40 years, what I thought was right was wrong. I'm like, yeah, it sucks. Yep. It sucks that you thought for the longest time that the sky was orange and the sun was blue.
Sure.
I'm sorry. It's the other way around, but that's what it is. So it's usually the adults had bad information that was thought to be right information that they worked on intently for X amount of years until it fell apart. And most of the time, the error is pivot. And then the non-moving fundamental, which is setup, that is critical because, in my opinion, once the golf swing is in, you never lose the ability to access your swing. You have a poor setup that your hand-eye coordination and your athleticism is trying to make up for because you don't know that you're aimed 40 yards right.
Yeah.
You don't know that the ball's too far back in your stance. You don't know you're too bent over or too tall. And then your athleticism is trying to make up for it. And at the highest level, it happens on TV too. The best players in the world get slightly off. They can't figure out what's wrong. And they always blame their swing. They bring their coach in. Like, oh, I'm swinging terrible. I can't do this. I can't do that. The coach is like, hey, aim a little more to the left, move the ball a little more forward, and just stand up a little bit.
Yeah.
Stripe, 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 stripe. And you got to be kidding me. It wasn't my golf swing. I'm like,
interesting.
Nope.
Yeah, fascinating.
Bad setup. You can't lose muscle memory unless you get struck by lightning or you're addicted to opiates. Anytime that you're starting to swing bad, if you have a golf swing, it's because you've lost your setup, not because you lost your golf swing.
I see. Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And surely you've seen it time and time again, right? Making those slight corrections with people, and seeing kind of amazing things like that. It's similar in my world too, where there's usually a most significant restriction that we're working on. And then a lot of things tend to open up and you only have to kind of touch on other aspects. A lot of the times it comes down to the pelvis and it comes down to the rib cage and the thoracic spine, where a lot of issues come from, almost like you're saying setup, but their pelvis is kind of in the anterior tilt. He mentioned tight psoas, IT band, things like that. Anything that's dragging that pelvis back, tight erector spinae and that lumbar and the low back. And we talk about back pain in golfers, right? Another association there, that's for sure. But when that pelvis tilts forward, we lose access to gliding and rolling of the femur on the pelvis, right? So we lose hip mobility, and there's some structures, some soft tissue in there that we do need to help loosen up to keep it simple. But we also, and what a lot of people miss, is we have to adjust the pelvic orientation. We got to bring that thing back, because if we don't, we can work as much as we want, and maybe we'll gain a few degrees of hip mobility, internal or external rotation. But overall, we're not going to get to where we need to be unless we adjust the actual pelvis, and then all sorts of things start to open up. Even the way the foot will pronate or supinate will change if we just adjust the pelvis here a little bit, and then we can really attack those things with a lot more success. But
100%.
So it's almost the
And
same
I think
concept.
whatever it is that you do that allows people to move better, it probably rattles them just as much as whatever I do to make them move better.
It does.
Like you're telling me that me moving, getting my pelvis to get 3 degrees more vertical or more upright is going to make that much difference in my footwork, how my body rotates. And you're like, yep. Exactly. And you're like, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
But that's the cool thing about technology and information that we have now. We've probably, both of us in our profession, probably know more in the last 10 years than we knew in the previous 100.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And every day we're blowing people's minds who, when they were younger, they were doing this, and that's not what they were told. And it's like, well, but we're in the information age. Things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
And you just have to be open-minded. You have to stay in that growth mindset. We're like, hey, I didn't know that. Nobody knew then that this is how it's done. Well, now we do. So forget about the past. You can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. Be here right now.
Well said.
Be where your feet are.
Yeah.
Be present.
Perfect. Before we finish up here, I want to ask you just kind of an interesting question. Is there anything that you are currently working on in your own swing? Or are you going out there when you're playing and focusing mainly on just having a good time? Is there anything specifically that you're working on, or is it different every day?
Specifically what I'm working on, well, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm trying to work on the tightest pivot that I can create, because I'm 50. I'm a former national long driver, so I know how to load and unload, but sometimes I drift off the ball to feel like I've coiled up when I've actually just shifted weight, not coiled weight. That's a big problem in golf. So I'm trying to I'm working on keeping my head as still as I can while coiling. And then all of the strategic things. I'm trying to, it's like playing blackjack at the Bellagio. I'm trying to play the smartest shot I can play every time until I don't have a choice. I'm down by 2 with 3 holes to play. I got to make something happen if I want to win.
There you go.
But until then, I'm playing to the widest part of the fairway, to the middle of the green, and I'm trying to make as many pars as I can. You can't shoot over par if you don't make any bogeys.
Well said.
So I'm just trying to I want people to beat me.
Yeah.
I don't want to beat myself. And in my youth, I beat myself mainly because I thought that you had to be way better than you did to be great. Like what I thought great golf was has never happened.
Of course, yeah.
Like hit it right down the middle of every fairway, hit it to 4 feet every hole, tap in birdies, all that's what I thought Greg Norman did. He was my idol when I was growing up.
Greg Norman.
And I was like, well, he hits it close all the time. No, he doesn't. But it sure seemed like it.
Right.
And every time I hit it to 30 feet at age 17, I beat myself up unmercifully because I didn't hit it close to the hole. And I'm like, you suck. So I get into my head because I be programmed myself how bad I am because I was trying to be too perfect, not knowing that that's not what it was. As soon as I learned through evidence how far the average tour player hits it with each club, I'm like, my God, I'm almost as good as they are right now. What's wrong with me? And that's when I went in the search for the mind.
Gotcha.
And I really pay close attention to, one, the breathing, two, am I in the right place? And I know that because I train it. Am I in the right place when I walk into the ball? I don't want to be in the right place right before I take it back. I want to be in the right place as I walk in. So I'm paying attention to how I walk in. I'm paying attention to one thought, which I have a thought that keeps me centered in the backswing. And I have a strategic thought of where I want the ball to be. And I use visualization to make that occur. And when I give my brain a picture of what I want, the cerebellum sends the muscles, the information, how to hit the shot. If I'm in the right place, which I try to be in the right place at all times, then I'll probably hit an acceptable golf shot. And my kids will tell you right now at 50, I am a way better golfer than I've ever been with way less physical gifts because I'm getting older.
Yeah.
But I am so much smarter, so much more efficient, and I know how to access the right part of my mind when I'm playing the game. And it befuddles my oldest son who's playing golf at Methodist. Yeah. Because I just can't believe that you keep getting better as you're declining physically.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's what makes golf and life beautiful, is just because you're getting older doesn't necessarily mean you have to be worse.
Absolutely.
I might not be able to swing 135 miles per hour anymore, but I can still swing 121. And I might not be able to do this or do that anymore, but how many times do I really need to have that shot? Like once a year? I can live without it.
Yeah.
And I just play smarter, and I have a very clear picture of what it takes to be great. And I try to follow it as an example to my kids. And when I do playing lessons with my clients, I let them choose, but I strongly encourage them to let me play along.
Yeah.
Because it is way more impactful when somebody's leading by example than to just tell you.
Yeah.
If I'm there just telling you, that's one thing. But if I'm clearly demonstrating it from the pre-shot routine to the hit to the post-shot routine, and I'm doing what I say to do, and you see the outcome, it's tenfold what it does to oh, wow, I got to do that. And when they follow the lead, when they mirror, which is one of the most powerful learning mechanisms, when they mirror you, man, magic happens. And most people need that extra proof because they're already smart. What am I not doing? I can't believe it's that little. Well, it is. Or I can't believe it's that big. It is. And that's my job, and that's what I love to do. But I love to do it as a player because I like to be able to lead by example, not just be this talking head that just spits out information.
Yep.
I want to be able to back it up.
Beautiful.
And the reason why I think a lot of people choose to come see me is because I can still play at a pretty high level. And everybody would say hit 330. I get that.
Yeah.
And everybody would like to be able to think clearly. But if I can show it, it's way more powerful that way.
No doubt. Well said. Where do you like to play these days? Are you all over Nashville playing, checking out different courses and trying different places?
Oh, I do most of my playing lessons at West Haven Golf Club where I'm a member.
West Haven.
I used to teach golf there. I'm a member there now. So I do my playing lessons there, but I have a studio here. I'm in my studio right now.
Good.
I got a TrackMan studio in my home, all the bells and whistles, video, whatever. And it's in a very private setting. And I would have never in a million years thought that I would be teaching in my home,
Yep.
never on a driving range. And if I'm not doing that, I'm playing the game only with people.
Yep.
But with where technology is, and TrackMan is literally unbelievable when it comes to truly helping people learn quick. It's changed the game. And to me, it's the funnest thing in the world to do, to be able to have a TrackMan Doppler radar technology to help people make massive change in a very quick amount of time so that we can get on the golf course, because that's where the fun is. That's where also the real test is, so that I can really begin to help you. Most people don't realize that when they come in to see me, I'm over the top, I hit a slice, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, that's really not who I'm fixing. I'm fixing the guy who's trying to perform with your buddies in junior golf tournaments, in club tournaments, on TV. I'm trying to fix the nervous guy where other interferences are getting in the way of performance. What is that? How much of it's technical and how much of it's in your mind? And then we meld it all together and make you as good as we can be. And I'm very fortunate I get a chance to do what I love to do and get paid to do it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, living the dream. And you made it happen. So all impressive stuff. For anyone that wants to reach out, you had mentioned your Instagram, that golf Instagram is the best place for that. I'll have that kind of link down below. What is the name of that Instagram?
It's Virgil.Herring, has everything that I do.
All the stuff. Okay.
I also have Virgil Herring Golf, where I post what I do. I like to post my lessons. So like I'll videotape the highlights of a lesson and send it to my client. But I also like to do it, one, to highlight how great people are doing and watch them progress. But more than anything is that I want people to see how I have a reputation of being very technical, but I'm not technical at all. And I want people to hear that it's like, oh, wow, that's not very complicated. And of all the things that my least favorite thing / favorite thing to hear is, I haven't come to see you for years because I thought you were too technical, or I wasn't good enough to come see you. And you're literally teaching me at kindergarten level information and making something happen. I can't believe that I was so wrong about you. I hear that a lot. And obviously it's a blessing and a curse, but I keep it very simple. And I don't really use golf jargon to teach people. I use things that they've already done. If it has something to do with their hands, like, you ever play ping pong? How'd you control the paddle? If you're slicing it, you got to feel more topspin. If you're hooking it, you got to feel a little more cut. Whatever that is, like, oh wow, I never even thought about that. If you're learning how to flex your lead wrist coming into impact, you ever throw a frisbee? If you're throwing a frisbee, that wrist is flexed before you let it go. Did you ever skip a rock? Yeah. What did it look like when it's coming through? Trail hands bent back, unloading later. It's like, oh wow, I never even thought of it that way. I don't use golf talk. I use things that people have already done 1,000 times that are easy to visualize in the mind, because if you can see it here, you can do it here.
It's beautiful.
And so you can see my golf, how I teach on Virgil Herring Golf, but it also goes to Virgil.Herring. But you see my public speaking, you see me on TV, you see me on my podcast, all of that's on Virgil.Herring.
Beautiful. Excellent. And we'll have that link down below as well to help make that as easy as possible. But otherwise, it's been great talking with you. Thanks for coming on. I learned a lot today. A lot of key points that I'm glad that we're both addressing, and then there's even more things for me to dive into and see how I can be even more of an ally to help people that come into my world feel some of these things almost like prerequisites. So when they come to you,
Yeah.
it's not brand new, and it can be a little bit more cohesive between the coaches, right? That spectrum where they
Well,
come to me and then move on
well,
to
Nick,
you.
you're very, very good at what you do.
Well, I appreciate that.
So this is a great collaboration because my people, when they watch this, they're going to watch it because of what I'm going to say, and they're going to find out that you know what the heck you're talking about. And then this conversation really shows that we're like a team.
Mm-hmm.
We're not two separate. We're not two separate entities.
Yeah.
We're a team that is designed to help the client achieve their personal desires. Most people look at us as two separate entities, and we're actually on the same team. We're two ingredients in the recipe that are absolutely necessary for it to come out right.
That's right.
So I'm very impressed with the work that you do and that the quality of impact that you've made on my clients already. And my job is to keep funneling my people to you, because when they go see you, they come back better for me. And that's ultimately what they've paid us to do,
That's right.
make them
That's
better.
a beautiful thing. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.